The video that you just watched was from an open world shooter video game called Arma 3. And unfortunately, the gentleman that you see right next to me, his name is Barry McCaffrey, who also happens to be an MSNBC contributor and a retired 4-star US general, thought that that was a real video featuring something that went down in the Russian invasion into Ukraine, which is concerning. Now, in a tweet, he shared that video and said, Russian aircraft getting nailed by UKR missile defense. Russians are losing large numbers of attack aircraft, UKR air defense becoming formidable. But again, let me just repeat, it was actually just a video from a video game. And he would have known that if he just took a look at the text at the very bottom of the video that has the hashtag Arma3. So there's that. Also, you should note that maybe MSNBC needs to reconsider hiring people who have cozy ties to defense contractors, as this guy does, and maybe people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, so look, to be fair to him, man, that's a hell of a video game. That looked really realistic.
It did look realistic, yeah.
Like we're always honest and fair, right? On the other hand, if your claim to fame is being a great military analyst, you should probably know that that was a video game. And this is part of the problem that we talked a lot about in a lot of contexts here, which is that the people in power are so old. It's because they're a good return on investment. And so corporations keep giving them money because they make more money for them. So whereas someone who's younger is a risky investment. Now they have plenty of corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans that they also buy. But guys like McCaffrey and Pelosi and Biden and McConnell, they hang around until they're 108. And they're like, oh, this little video game looks like it's the Russians in Ukraine. Oh. Okay, so, but that leads to the more important point, which is the one Anna alluded to. So here's who McCaffrey works for. He's on the board of directors of Atlantic Council of the United States. That's a think tank that pushes for more militarism. DynCorp International, that's a defense contractor. Global Linguist Solutions, that does military contracts as well. McNeil Technologies, then there's a health company, there's HNTB Corporation, which does infrastructure, both. I know they do some here, I don't know if they also do abroad, which there would be a lot of if you're rebuilding a country. And then he has his own company, BR McCaffrey Associates. So he has tons and tons of financial connections to the defense industry. So when he pushes for us to spend more money in Ukraine, by the way, a position that in this case I agree with, but he's also pushed for wars I do not agree with. And he doesn't, and I wouldn't mind it if he said, hey, look, I love wars and I think a war is gonna help America. But he has financial incentives to create every single war, and NBC and MSNBC never tell you that.
No, they never disclose the conflicts of interest that are incredibly relevant to what the contributor is sharing his or her opinions on. And keep in mind that McCaffrey has actually discussed the Russian invasion multiple times on MSNBC in recent weeks. So this is a guy who's giving his expert analysis with that huge conflict of the conflict of interest at play, but again, the audience doesn't necessarily know about that. And then I want to give you some more details about those conflicts, right? Because it is relevant. For instance, in April of 2008, the New York Times identified McCaffrey as one of several dozen retired military officers who were part of a controversial Pentagon program that sought to publicize favorable views of US policies in the Iraq War by debriefing analysts before their appearances on TV news programs. So he not only is aware that there's a conflict of interest, he spreads that conflict of interest to other people who appear on television news programs. Without explicitly saying how McCaffrey was advised by the Pentagon, the newspaper reported 2 of NBC's most prominent analysts, Barry McCaffrey and the late Wayne Downing, were on the advisory board of the Committee for the Liberation of Iraq, an advocacy group created with White House encouragement in 2002 to help make the case for ousting Saddam Hussein. Both men also had their own consulting firms and sat on the boards of major military contractors, of course. And he has also been accused, by the way, of committing war crimes in the Gulf War. Let me give you the details on that. According to an investigative report by Seymour Hersh, McCaffrey's 24th Division repeatedly fired on Iraqi civilians, POWs, and fleeing soldiers who did not return fire. Although an Army investigation found no merit to the allegations against McCaffrey, many of the soldiers who served under him and some Army higher-ups remain convinced that he was guilty.
I actually read some of that reporting, and people who were on the battlefield, American soldiers, were like, we were not being fired at. Not at all. The only time we ever came across fire was a tiny bit of friendly fire from other American troops. And so one of them said, we were basically a glorified firing squad. We just killed everyone that happened to be there, including civilians, by the way. That was McCaffrey. In America and in mainstream media, that is not a mark of shame. That is something to promote you over and to brag about. And that's a sign of honor. Now, look, McCaffrey's the most famous of these guys for a couple of reasons. Number one, he does it through all the administrations. He came out against Trump, so they're like, oh, he's a Democrat. Yeah, he worked in a Democratic administration, and the Democrats are just as guilty of this militarism. But remember, he started all this in 2002 under Bush, and he loved the Iraq war. So he's bipartisan, corporate Republicans, corporate Democrats. So how do we start wars together, right? And the second reason he's most famous is because he once went on NBC News and said, oh, the Abrams tank is what we need in Iraq. Hey, the Abrams tank is what's winning us the war in Iraq. And of course, he didn't disclose that he works for the exact company that produces the Abrams tank. And NBC, after all of those embarrassments and humiliations of their so-called journalistic ethics, to this day has him on. And then their justification is because he's such a brilliant military analyst, the guy who just put up a video game thinking that was real war footage. No, they don't have him on despite his corruption. They have him on because of his corruption.